said to me the other day, sometimes, Taoiseach, in government, you have to do hard things. And these difficult choices are being done in the interests of our people and the entire country.
One way of doing that is, as you said yesterday, squeezing more out of the Croke Park Agreement. By which you meant what?
Well, Croke Park was not my deal. This was an agreement that was worked out by the previous government with the trades unions. But it's not all about trades unions, it's also about management. Now, we accept that the Croke Park deal to date has delivered substantially in terms of cooperation, in terms of lack of industrial unrest, reduction of public servant numbers and pay and so on. But it's got to do more. And in order for Croke Park to deliver, I want to see it implemented in full. And that means that we accelerate the pace of implementation. Now, I met with the implementation group along with Minister Brendan Howlin. We had very good discussions with the group, which includes obviously trade unions and management. So every minister now, Cathal, between here and the preparation of the budget for the first week in December, are looking at the ceilings that they have, are looking at the structures that they are dealing with in terms of their own departmental responsibilities, both in terms of how do they propose to get further evidence of Croke Park being able to be implemented in terms of work structures and work practices and rosters to avoid having to cut frontline services.
And is that all? Because Pat Rabbitte on the programme yesterday spoke to us about something he said he would support, which was using a clause in the agreement dealing with the economic situation not being what was expected when that agreement was drawn up, which would allow discussion of things like increments and allowances and pensions. Is that an area you intend to go into?
Well, the position is that the Croke Park Agreement allows for discussion about issues that are of concern to ministers and to government. And that's why I said that in the preparation of their individual reports for the Minister for Finance, each minister has now got to look at the issues that concern them in their departments.
So are those areas I've mentioned on the table?
Yes. Well, the Croke Park Agreement covers the entire spectrum, and it's perfectly feasible for any minister through the implementation group or directly with the group of unions and managers to talk about the issues that concern them. Because, as I said, the choice here is to have Croke Park implemented in full from where we are now. And both Minister Howlin and myself have made it clear publicly on many occasions that we want to see that process accelerated.
Is the payment of increments or allowances or pensions under the agreement as it is now, is that something you want to deal with, or is it sacrosanct?
What I want to deal with is what Croke Park actually stands for. As I say, the agreement is one that we have inherited, but that we intend to fulfil and to implement in full. So I don't see any reason why, even listening to union leaders themselves saying there is nothing to stop government or members of government from interacting both with the unions and the management here in terms of issues that affect them and their departments. And that covers a whole range of issues.
Does it include increments and allowances and pensions?
Well, I don't want to get into any individual detail in respect of Croke Park now, except to say that I don't intend to trigger the emergency collapse of Croke Park. I intend to work the deal through as quickly as possible in full, and in the course of those discussions that we examine what are the best opportunities to get the most from the entire public service here insofar as the delivery of services is concerned, and not have to impact unduly on people who have to avail of the very necessary services that they provide.
Speaking of which, it's not your deal, as you said, and we've already seen the kind of controversy over cuts that are just dealing with a budget overrun in health, never mind more cuts to come next year. Are you comfortable with this agreement that you are paying unchanged and unreduced salaries of people on 70, 80, 90, 100,000 and more in the public service and leaving those salaries untouched while having to cut, for example, home helps?
Well, for instance, the Minister for Health has already clearly indicated that he wants to deal with the question of consultants' pay within the guidelines of the Croke Park Agreement, and the process within the agreement has been worked on that. As I say, the question that arose last week in respect of personal assistance, ministers made it perfectly clear in instruction that that's not to go ahead, but that the monies to be found will be found from within that disability vote by looking at the question of travel, accommodation, and other elements of the management of that
Looking
cash.
back on what happened in the area of health and those cuts, which, as I say, are only about an overrun. They were signalled to members of your party. They were announced because they had to be, because the Health Service Executive did what they were told, and then they were partially reversed. Do you think it was handled well?
I don't want to get into the performance of any individual minister here. The decision and instruction was made very clearly by the minister. We move on from that. I think,
when you say move on, some of these cuts have been reversed, others haven't, and people who have lost home helps, and that decision has not been reversed, are looking at the same time, they're looking at people who are on very high salaries, which apparently are entirely protected.
And as I said, some consultants are now coming in on Saturdays and Sundays.
Apart from the consultants?
Well, in respect of all of these areas, that's what the Croke Park Agreement is about, the question of how you can reduce the public sector size and the public sector cost and the pay bill that's involved in that. And that means, in many cases, an examination of work practices, of structures, of rosters in all of these areas. And that's open under the existing elements of the agreement for discussion, which we will follow through. But I would say this as well. You have to look at the broader context when you mention health, for instance. I mean, why is it that we tolerate consistently in this country a situation where every night of the week up to 2,000 hospital beds are filled with patients because of drink circumstances? We now know that in the next decade or so, from the Chief Medical Officer, that over 250,000 diabetics are going to come down the track. Most of these are preventable by activity, by attitude, by diet, and so on like that.
Yeah, that's not going to save money in the next year.
No, I understand that.
From everything you say, Taoiseach, it seems clear that apart from hospital consultants, maybe, all other public salaries in the public service will be left untouched. Well, even those ones over 100,000.
What I've said to you is that the government want to see the Croke Park Agreement implemented in full. We've had delivery from Croke Park to date. We want to see the remainder of that agreement accelerated in its implementation. I'm at one and at Edam with my colleague in government, Brendan Howland, who handles this. And as I say, we met with the implementation group. We will meet with them again. It's not just about interaction between government and trades unions. It's about interaction also with management.
Are you worried?
Which have the issues like sick pay ranging from 2% absenteeism to 9%. This is you can't put up with that.
Are you worried about how more assertive and publicly assertive, whatever about unease in your own party about the health cuts, which are only the start, there are more to come, how assertive and complaining some people in the Labour Party are now saying, we can't live with this?
Let me assure you, I've spoken at length to the Taoiseach last week. We've spoken at length at Cabinet about this. There is a complete focus from the Fine Gael party and the Labour Party to see this term of government through to its finality, not to turn our back on the mandate given to us by the people, and to make the difficult choices. People say to me all over the country, get on with the Taoiseach. We want to get out of this bailout programme. We want to see our economy rectified. We know you have to do hard things. All we can say to you is, go ahead and make your decisions, make them in the fairest way that you can in the interests of all the people in our country.
Some Labour TDs made it clear they're not fair and they can't live with what's announced.
Like I see within the general media, obviously a focus on wanting to kind of, focus on what might be considered differing voices. As let me assure you, and the people out there, the Fine Gael party and the Labour Party, myself as Taoiseach, Eamon Gilmore as Taoiseach, and our ministers in government are focused completely on fulfilling the mandate given to us by the Irish people just 18 months ago. We have a difficult series of challenges up ahead, but the prize is great. We're not dealing just with problems internally in our own economy. Clearly, Europe and the circumstances that it finds itself in now are also causing some concern.
And the question of, and you mentioned this last night when you spoke at the dinner, that you are still looking clearly for recognition of our efforts on public spending from the EU, and also a deal on debt relief. You've been praised, or Ireland has been praised, for example, by Mario Draghi most recently as an example to the rest of Europe. Now, praise is nice, but are you getting anywhere?
I have no interest in praise at all. One of the things, as I said in the beginning of this short interview, Cathal, was to rebuild a sense of reputation and our standing abroad with other countries. I think we've done that to a great extent. What it really means, though, is that when you actually sit around the table with 27, 17 within the Eurozone, you have to be able to build a sense of trust with other leaders. In other words, that they know that you will do what you say you will do. And that's why I was so proud of the Irish people in the clarity of their decision on the fiscal stability.
Sure, but when you hear, for example, Father Sean Healy saying that you'll get nothing for being the best kid in the austerity class. I mean, or put it another way, when are we going to get something?
I'm not looking for any credit or praise here. You're a fool in politics if you do that. But what I do look at is the fact that at the June Council meeting, the European Council, the heads of government, Ireland was one of only 2 countries written into that decision. I expect that decision to be honoured and to be implemented. I know that Commissioner Wren said he'd like to see it finalised and dealt with by the end of October. I would support that very strongly. I'd say that Michael Noonan has done a remarkably skillful job in following this through. Actually, he leaves Westport today to go to Paris, Berlin and Rome before an informal in Cyprus this weekend.
It's work in progress.
It's work in progress,
yep.
but the
no
point,
sign of result.
The point is, people said you will never get a break between the sovereign and the bank debt at Europe. You will never get a deal like this. They said the same thing about interest rate reductions. I'm happy to say that it strengthened my hand greatly as Taoiseach when I could go out to the European Council meeting and say, listen here, the point is we're the only country to actually have put this to a referendum of the people, and the clarity of the results, 60-40, stood greatly to Ireland being recognised by our European colleagues as being worthy of recognition here.
Finally, Taoiseach, you made a jocular reference to the word reshuffle last night. It caused a bit of a flutter in the tables around me. Is there going to be a reshuffle between now and the end of this government? Well,
that was Chatham House rules applied, as you know, at the function last night. I did make the point that people were setting out from here after the meeting concludes today to climb Croke Park within a few miles of here. And he made a jocular reference to the fact that anybody who didn't get up there in an hour and 3/4 had no chance in a reshuffle. It was a jocose remark.
All right.
I
wasn't in the room when the word Chatham House rules, I certainly wasn't aware of it.
I expect every minister, Cathal, every minister of state, every member of our party to understand that we're focused here on fulfilling our mandate, on rectifying our country.
So the answer to the question, is there going to be a reshuffle sometime?
That's a matter for consideration by the Taoiseach in due course.
Enda Kenny, Taoiseach and leader of Fine Gael, thank you very much for talking to us today.